Ja, ik zie je dan. Okay. I see that nearly everybody has taken the seat. The next speaker is on a different trail, Gied Berge. But before Gied Berge is going to introduce his own text, I would like to ask Mr. Sekir to come forward here, because Mr. Ten Berge would like to communicate with you. Yeah. Mr. Ten Berge.
Okay, dear audience, dear people of many roads, I would say, I thank you for inviting me to this symposium of Sultanstrail. It was around 2005.
Use the mic a bit better than so far. Close to your mouth.
Yeah, it was around 2005. Sadat Shakir invited me for a lunch, and we had interesting talks about the experiences of a Christian and a Muslim pilgrim on the Camino Santiago. And before I go further, I should like to hand over my PhD, because I went on another walk. I was more attracted by the travels to another part of the former Ottoman Empire, the Holy Land, Israel, Palestine.
This will make us very curious to what you have to say. The word is to you. You have, as you know, 20 minutes.
Yeah, okay. The former, the land of Israel and Palestine, the land I am always speaking about. And anyway, a land where there is also a lot of trekking. For example, the initiative Abraham Pass. I would know. Also a trekking project for young people organized by the Franciscans. Very interesting initiatives. And I can only mention them here. I like to draw your attention to a relatively new pilgrimage phenomenon on which I conducted my PhD research, and that I completed in 2020. Come and see pilgrims with a mission. This is the book. It contains both my own qualitative research on a group of Dutch come and see pilgrims in 2013, and two extensive literature searches, one of a social cultural and a second of a historical theological nature. The second part of my book I can only mention here this afternoon. You can see on the cover a graffiti depicting Pope Francis in prayer at a segregation wall. Demonstrated that he is a come and see pilgrim by himself. This and other Christian graffiti on the wall in Israel, the anthropologist Jackie Feldman interpreted as a new form of Christianization of tourism. I criticized this terminology Okay. This was my special wake-up call. So late. I criticized his terminology because we don't talk about promoting conversions, of course. The Christian Palestinian theologian Mitri Raheb interpreted these pilgrim graffiti as a form of art, helping a dwindling minority to breathe. We heard the term breathe earlier this day. To breathe in a situation of permanent oppression. What I'm going to present to you, too fast. I introduced to you a rather new type of pilgrims on the axis between pilgrim and tourist in the Holy Land, One with a mission of... why does it... one with a message of peace and reconciliation. And secondly, some topics and questions which may have references to Sultans Trail, with the question, makes it sense to explore its destination and the eventual message behind it in a more profound way. In literature, there exist many concepts, more religious or more secular ones, characterizing modern and postmodern types of traveling. Peace and justice pilgrims, responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, etc. Pilgrims who are seeking self-realization. In 2004 and 2006, I organized travels to the land, and I called them solidarity pilgrimages. And I did it as a Pax Christi employee. Pax Christi is a peace movement originated in 1945, as a movement of young French and German pilgrims. On the left, you see one of my reports. In the picture, a pilgrim applying graffiti on the wall himself, a recurring ritual today for many pilgrims in Bethlehem. On the right, the so-called Kairos document of Palestinian Christians, a manifesto with an elaborated evaluation of their past, present, and future. And it includes a call to visit the Holy Land, but not just as mean pilgrims or tourists, but as conscious travelers with a mission. Among other symbolism, I witnessed the dedication of the so-called Pax Christi icon by these pilgrims. It's actually a mini iconostasis, so to speak, because of the multiple images. This Christian ritual object is not worshipped, but just a practice of honor, helping to give the viewer a glimpse of the persons who live with God now, because during their pilgrimage way, their lives, they excelled in goodness, truth, and spiritual beauty. These qualities, we know in Augustine's explanation, come from God himself. It's not coincidence that this Pax Christi icon contains figures from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as well. In the center we see an image of Jesus, Isa, but also the brothers Esau, father of Edom and the Edomites, and Jacob, and we see Mary or Miriam. Hagar and Ishmael, also Hagia Sophia, the holy patroness of the church mosque of the same name. And we see Francis of Assisi, who went on a peace mission to the Sultan of Damiate, and last but not least, images of Jesus' own encounters with people from other religions and peoples. This icon has a lot of intercultural and interreligious references and depict interreligious ambitions and recommend these to pilgrims. These ambitions also influenced my personal theological orientation. What kind of people inspire me today in this respect? In 2000, I met the Latin patriarch Michel Sabat, who later challenged me as a pilgrim guide to go and pray at the checkpoint too. I did so, until soldiers at Rachel's Tomb chased our group away. Later I met Jeremy Milgram, one of the rabbis who founded Israeli human rights movement, Rabbis for Human Rights, moral critics of the manner in which the State of Israel treats non-Jews as second-class citizens. Once Jeremy said to me, pilgrims to the land who are committed to peace and justice keep me going. For Muslims, there are many obstacles to visit their holy sites in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, such as Al-Haram, Al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary known as the Temple Mount. From Gaza, this is completely impossible. A man who fascinates me in this context is Alistair McIntosh, an anthropologist and a Quaker who, together with Muslim teachers and students in Gaza University, developed a unique project for students to imagine their own virtual pilgrimage. Some students projected in their virtual pilgrimage a very special desire. One day, walking to Jerusalem, but with Jewish and Christian peers together. My PhD book has an empirical and theoretical social cultural part, and second, as I told, a historical, a theological part as well. I name 4 authors who challenged me in particular. First, the philosopher and cultural sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. Second, my own supervisor, the emeritus professor ritual studies in Tilburg University, Paul Post, the anthropologist John Gied, and the theologian Dirk Tidball. Bauman early confronted me with his strong conviction that in our times the phenomenon of the pilgrim rested on an anachronistic image of man. Post criticized that conclusion firmly because Bauman didn't base himself on any empirical observation. Tidball, as a theologian, appreciated Bauman's metaphorically formulated culture criticism. Tidball himself relied on the introspection of the pilgrim as a longing human being, a phenomenon with an enduring desire for a better world. John Gied pressed my nose on the reality of the so-called arena of pilgrims, disturbing places with so many rivalries and conflicts with people who may exclude other people because of their beliefs, but who may also be capable sharing their sanctuaries. So many failures and capacities within pilgrimage to deal with in the past and also today, that's for sure. So 2 main theoretical lenses for my research became that of the topic of from pilgrim to tourist and vice versa, and that of the so-called arena of pilgrims, considering big differences among both pilgrims and tourists, especially on their destinations themselves. I refer, for instance, to their different and even conflicting manifestations of cultural, religious, and political identities. Jerusalem, but also other big pilgrim destinations, illustrate that. Here we see some on the very diverse groups of pilgrims you may encounter, especially in Jerusalem, and which shows the city as a typical arena of pilgrims. Above left, we see a Christian pilgrim on the Via Dolorosa. Does she encounter a tourist? Or do they transform both into tourists? A question on the axis between pilgrim and tourist. For Catholics and mainstream Protestants, the contemporary state of Israel and the city of Jerusalem are not real signs of a divine revelation. Israel is not a Glaubensstaat, the emeritus Pope Joseph Ratzinger noted accurately in a theological article. But for some evangelical Christians, this state of Israel certainly is. Here you see Christian Zionists in the middle with the balloons. draped with Israeli flags, and who come every year by thousands and thousands from all over the world to join in celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, giving expression to their exclusive loyalty with the State of Israel. Above right, you see a group of young American Jews on a so-called birthright trip, funded by the state to strengthen their cultural, political, actually also their religious identity, but in particular their loyalty to the State of Israel. Below left, a group of young Muslims at the Dome of the Rock, a pilgrimage, or also a tourist outing. Probably they come from some place in the Arab world, because for Palestinian Muslims, such a visit to Jerusalem is practically impossible. So, a forbidden pilgrimage, just as Potala Palace is for non-Chinese Tibetan Buddhists, and Mount Ararat is for Armenian Christians. On his pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 2009, Pope Francis was accompanied by a Jewish and a Muslim friend. He visited the Temple Mount. Unlike for Jews and Muslims, the Temple Mount is not a real holy place for Christians, which allowed the Pope to demonstrate his ambition playing a role in interreligious encounters. What is still missing are images of my pilgrims with a mission, answering the call, come and see. I connect the images here to the three main motives of these pilgrims, which I distilled in my research. First motive, mission. This means supporting a culture of peace, reconciliation, loving one's neighbor. What we see here on the wall in Bethlehem is a graffiti, again, made by pilgrims. The separation wall has fallen, and the heavenly Jerusalem that overcomes all differences becomes visible. Second motive, contact and encounter. Within and outside one's religion. These Christian pilgrims celebrate the Eucharist, but not in their own exclusive group of pilgrims, but with fellow Palestinian Christians. And they also attend Sabbath services and Friday prayers. This Eucharist in the open air took place on a piece of land belonging to a cloister, land confiscated now by Israel to build the wall. The third motive, the moral pilgrim, personal transition through practicing values and connect people. We see Christian pilgrims led by Jewish Israeli human rights activists, nota bene, helping by settlers threatened Palestinian farmer to bring in his olive harvest. Before coming to my summary, I still want to move for a moment to Istanbul. For Byzantine and Latin Christians over more than 1,000 years, it was named Constantinople, as we know. Perhaps I make then a loaded, controversial historical remark, but one that still relates to the present and one that has not lost much of his significance in the recent secular decades. Look at the pictures. The so formulated sequence from church to mosque, from mosque to museum, and from museum back to mosque, albeit partly still with a museum function, makes the destination of Sultanstrail special, also from a point of view of tourism and pilgrimage studies. Perhaps the destination Istanbul may be coincidental for people who are primarily attracted by hiking as such, by nature, by culture in general, but not in a specific sense, so not with a mission. And probably they are just attracted by another more individual, postmodern motive of walking as self-therapy, self-realization in Jung's terms. As you many notice, by the way, a lot on the Camino today. Yet Sultanstrail as a specific route cannot simply be detached from 2 millennia of clashes, ruptures and advances between the East and the West. I can't elaborate this here further, but I assume you may understand what my suggestion is, looking at Sultanstrail also through my 2 lenses, the social-cultural and the historical-theological one. I became more interested in a broader and more in-depth narrative also of this road, where it wants to go and why, what impact it may get on the participants in meeting people on their special destination. These are not just practical questions. It brings me finally to a few topics and questions, more or less random. Are Jerusalem and Istanbul similar as arenas of pilgrims, places that bother, religiously, politically? Is Sultanstrail just a hiking trail serving self-realization, so without a common narrative? Or is it more than that? Sultanstrail is called by itself as multicultural, non-religious, apolitical, independent, with respect of each other. Culture and history are important, but beneath the surface of such self-esteem, are they perhaps still connected to deeper cultural, political identities or religious, educational ambitions? Are there cultural and moral incentives conceivable to consider Sultanstrail also as trekking or pilgrimage with an own mission? And then, what mission? So, I'm coming to the end, not answering the questions. So what topics I presented to you? The empirical and theoretical approaches of my research. From the book, a Christian composition of icons illustrating narratives for peace and justice pilgrims in the land with interreligious references. Religious activists in the arena of pilgrims who inspired me, theorists who inspired my research, motives of pilgrims going to places that bother, places that disturb, and which must disturb. Referring to pilgrims with a mission in the land, some probable topics to discuss for Sultan's Trail. It's up to you. And my book for a special price. You can take it with you and pay later. I have my address there. Okay. Thank you very much.
2 slides backwards, please. Can you do that? Because I know how difficult it is. 2 slides backwards. Yeah, okay, top. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's on a completely different trail, but there is a relation. Because you did highlight, and that was quite interesting, it did intrigue me, the differences and relation between pilgrimage and tourism. And you also made a distinction between different types of pilgrims, morally, or connection, and with a mission. Sorry, but I can speak also without. You can hear me. No?
But you're not recorded then, eh?
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not
going to repeat. So that's what you did, and we are grateful for that. And I'm quite grateful as a chair for these questions. We are not going to answer them. That's not for us. But that is also for the group who's organizing the Sultans Trail, and maybe some of the speakers and discussants later on could come back to it. We don't have time to answer the questions today, but they are quite important. Thank you very much. Thank you for your research. Thank you for your book. Now we go to the next speaker. Thank you.